I set a trap for my soon-to-be ex-wife, making her think I was cheating, then vanished like a ninja ghost, delivering a Christmas Day reckoning. Grab some snacks, because this is a long story, spanning from late 2019 to just last week. Names have been changed for privacy. Here's the backstory. Masun, my soon-to-be ex, was my high school sweetheart. We started dating in 1992, both 17. We're both 45 now, and have been together ever since. She's the only woman I've ever been with. We got married 5 years later, at 22, fresh out of college. A year after that, we had the first of our 2 sons, now 22 and 17. I gave her 23 years, built her a house, worked hard to give her the life she wanted. Sure, we had rough patches, but what marriage doesn't? Even at our worst, we found ways to work through things and come out stronger, which made her affair all the more shocking. Fast forward to March 2020, when I first sensed something was off. The 2 months prior had been a slump for us. I was recovering from knee reconstruction surgery, having torn my ACL in the fall of 2019, and was still pretty immobile. My knee only had about 55% range of motion. This impacted a lot at home. I was on medical leave from work and couldn't do my usual chores, so things piled up. My sons helped where they could, but things only I could do had to wait, or fell to my wife, which she wasn't happy about. Things in our bedroom also came to a standstill. They'd been slowing down before my injury, but in my condition, they stopped completely. During these months, Sue, as we'll call her, spent more time hanging out with colleagues after work, which was normal for her. I didn't think much of it. In our 23 years together, I'd never had reason to worry or distrust her. She had her friends, I had mine, and we had mutual friends. I went out with my friends regularly, no problem, everything was above board. Around January of that year, I noticed something odd. Sue started pulling away from me noticeably. Sure, we were in a slump, but she'd never withheld affection from me to that extent. The usual hugs and kisses stopped. She'd always been on her phone, even before my suspicions arose, but she'd always share things she found online, DIY ideas, Pinterest recipes, memes, all sorts of stuff, but now she was guarded with it. Even her interactions with me became sharper, like she couldn't be bothered. So now it's March, COVID has hit NYC, and the city's in lockdown. Our chosen professions were considered essential, so neither of us had to work from home. I'd recently been cleared to return to work after 5 months off, and I was itching to get back, as 5 months of inactivity and not being able to be physical was driving me crazy. For context, I'm a very active person, a huge martial arts enthusiast, and usually hit the gym 4 days a week, on top of all the projects I do around the house. Within a week or 2 of the lockdown, Masun, my soon-to-be ex, told me she'd have to start working overtime again. I didn't think much of it, it's her line of work. I assumed it would be every other day, but it turned out to be every day, and not just for an hour or 2. She'd come home 3 or more hours late, shower, spend a little time with me and our 17-year-old, our 22-year-old was living out with his girlfriend, then go to bed. As my knee got better, we became intimate again, but as you might guess, she wasn't mentally or emotionally there, which I quickly picked up on. By early April, the picture was becoming clearer. All the signs pointed to an affair. That's when I decided I needed answers. I hit the internet, looking for things to watch out for, signs of infidelity, and sure enough, she checked almost every box. My search then progressed to how to find proof. I started with her social media, looking at her Facebook posts from a few months prior. Mostly pictures of us and our sons, her and her friends, some of her out with coworkers. In these photos, there was her closest friend from work, and some other colleagues I'd never met. But I noticed a recurring theme. In many of these photos, there was one guy who, whenever he was in the picture, was standing way too close to her. Arm around her shoulder, hand on her lower back, just too close for someone I'd never met. Needless to say, it made me uncomfortable, but that wasn't the worst of it. Nope, the worst part was that this guy was apparently Facebook friends with her and followed her posts. So I looked up his Facebook profile, and lo and behold, I was blocked. Why would I be blocked from seeing this guy's profile if he was Facebook friends with her? Yeah, I was in full Sherlock mode at this point. I wasn't even trying to deny it anymore, I knew she was having an affair with this guy. My mission was to figure out how long it had been going on, which I did throughout April and May. You know, I didn't realize until then the kind of deep information you can get from cell phone records and email logs. We had a family phone plan, and I was able to pull quite a bit of data. My soon-to-be ex's data history showed that from October 2019 to April 2020, her 2 most frequently contacted numbers were mine and one I didn't recognize. Take a guess whose number that was? A quick Google search confirmed it was the guy from the photos who'd blocked me on Facebook. We'll call him P, because he's a real piece of work. The picture was getting clearer, but most of their messages and texts were disjointed, meaning she was deleting a lot. I knew she was having an affair with this guy, but there wasn't anything in the data that I could use as solid proof. I needed more. That's when I told my best friend what I'd discovered. He asked if I'd confronted her with what I had, and I said no, because I didn't feel it was enough. That's when he told me about an app I could download to monitor her communications in real time. I won't name it, as I don't know the rules here. I installed it, synced it with our data plan, and waited. Within a few days of doing so, I finally saw it, a string of texts between the two of them, talking about how much fun they'd had the night before, and making plans to do it again that weekend. It was a gut punch. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. I guess that moment could be considered my day of reckoning. For the next 2 days, I was just heartbroken. I pulled away from her. In the 2 days following my obvious distress, she'd try to comfort me, ask me what was wrong, but I'd brush her off and walk away. I couldn't even look at her. This woman I'd given 23 years of my life to, given her everything and more as a husband, and she'd betrayed our marriage for a guy who was only 5 years older than our oldest son. By the third day, I wasn't even sad anymore. I was furious. I contacted Oz, told him my suspicions were confirmed, and he asked if I'd confronted her yet. I said no, and told him I wanted revenge. I didn't want to just divorce her, I wanted to destroy her, I wanted to make her life miserable, ruin her. This would take time, and I made a plan. In my reading and research about infidelity, I came across a quote that resonated with me: "The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability." This would be the foundation of my plan. I would make her life a living hell while secretly planning my exit strategy. So now it's early June, and I still have the app installed. I'm gathering as much data as I can, almost nightly. In their back and forth messages, they talked as if they were in a full-blown relationship, sending sexts, romantic stuff, nudes, the whole 9 yards. I'd stopped looking at any of it by that point. I was just collecting information and cataloging it on my private server. In the meantime, I started doing things out of character. I started going out at odd hours, I started coming home later than her. In front of her, I was on my phone more than usual, and when she'd ask what I was doing, I'd simply say stuff and put it away. I also changed all my account logins so she couldn't access anything of mine. Keep in mind, throughout our marriage, we never hid anything from each other, but right around the time I suspected she started her affair, she also changed her passwords on Facebook and her phone, claiming it was because of security breaches in recent months. What a convenient excuse to hide her infidelity from her husband. Anyway, I told Oz, my sister, and 2 other close friends about my plan. These were people I trusted with my life, and I swore them to secrecy. For context, Oz and I had been friends since childhood, and the other 2, Joey and Nina, we'd known since high school. Keep Nina in mind, she'll play a significant role later. July rolled around, and my son, my soon-to-be ex, was in full-blown paranoia mode. She was texting and calling me more frequently now, asking if I'd be home when she got in, what time I'd be home, what I was doing when she wasn't around, and so on. I could see the seeds I'd planted the previous month sprouting in her mind, especially in her communications with P. She confided in him about her suspicions and confusion, telling him I was being cold and distant. The nerve of this woman. In these interactions with P, she suggested that maybe they should stop seeing each other at our house, as she didn't know if I'd show up unexpectedly, confirming that she'd indeed been sleeping with this guy in my own home. Thanks, Sue. In one particular communication, P asked her if she was worried that I might be cheating on her, which actually infuriated her. I can't even describe how happy and how many times I laughed reading that exchange. My unfaithful wife and her affair partner arguing about whether she was upset because her husband might be cheating on her. The irony was delicious. Remember, I wasn't seeing anyone else. I was usually at Oz's or Joey's, drinking beer, watching fights, hanging out with my brothers, or at my sister's, hanging out with her and Bill, who's like a brother to me. My sister is 52, and her husband is 58. She'd told him about my soon-to-be ex's infidelity, but not my plan, as he's a bit of a blabbermouth, and I couldn't risk it. Now we fast forward to October, and things were starting to heat up. I'd been running my fake affair for 3 months, and Sue was well aware I was actively pulling away. From the day I implemented my plan to the day she confronted me, October 20th, 2020, I hadn't touched her, no hugs, no kisses, no initiating intimacy, nothing, unlike her, still getting her needs met with P, whether at his place or in some motel. That afternoon, she called me at work, which wasn't uncommon before all this started, but definitely hadn't happened in a while, telling me to come straight home after work, saying she had something important to tell me. I won't lie to you, half of me believed she was going to confess to her infidelity, but of course, she didn't. Instead, when I got home, she asked me if I was unhappy with her. The absolute audacity. She listed the facts that I was spending too much time out, that I no longer showed her affection, and that our intimate life had completely died. She told me she was worried I was pushing her away because of how she'd treated me during my knee recovery months, and then the kicker, she actually asked me if I was cheating on her. Guys, I literally fell on the floor laughing, and when I say fell on the floor laughing, I mean full-on, clown-level, hysterical laughter. To her, it looked like I was laughing at the idea of me cheating, but in reality, I was laughing at the sheer irony of the situation. I was in tears, pounding the floor, full-on hysterical for a good 2 minutes before I calmed down enough to respond. I sat up, Looked her in the eyes for the first time in months, shook my head, but I didn't give her an answer. I got up, dusted myself off, kissed her on the top of her head, and proceeded to get ready for bed. Later that night, while I was in my office, I decided, you know what, considering how brief that interaction was, I wanted to see what she told him, so I fired up the app, and sure enough, they were actually texting in real time. She texted P, "I know he's cheating on me, I asked him tonight," and he literally laughed in my face. He fell on the floor laughing for like 5 minutes. It wasn't 5 minutes, of course. He doesn't even care about my feelings anymore, I don't know why or how, but he's gone, and I know I've lost him. This is karma, I know it. The grin on my face reading those texts must have been like the Cheshire Cat. She was unraveling. P tried to reassure her, saying that if I cared enough about her, she wouldn't have come to him, for him to give her what I wasn't, but the tone of her responses told me she was starting to have doubts. She had actually betrayed our marriage because I was unable to fulfill my duties as a husband due to a legitimate injury, an affair that had been going on for almost a year at that point, but the thought of her losing me to another woman was enough to shake her. What a coward. Throughout all of this, I was also executing the second part of my revenge plan, getting all my finances in order. In September, I met with a family lawyer to start preparing the divorce paperwork, including the mountain of evidence I'd collected by that point. New York is a fault state for divorce, and the sheer amount of evidence I'd gathered proving Sue's infidelity would almost certainly guarantee I could crush her in the divorce proceedings. My lawyer instructed me to get all my finances squared away in preparation for any potential asset division. I did one better, I secretly moved all my money out of our joint accounts and into my personal accounts. I also started looking for apartments as part of phase 2. Now it's November, and I hadn't changed my behavior. In fact, I'd intensified it. This is where my friend Nina comes into play. For context, Nina and Sue were never close. I'd met Nina in my freshman year of high school, 2 years before I met Sue. Even back then, Sue saw Nina as a threat because she was my closest female friend. Sue always had this underlying distrust of Nina. She never said it outright, but it was obvious to anyone paying attention. Conversely, Nina was never too fond of Sue. Early on in my relationship with Sue, Nina pointed out how Sue had inserted herself into our little friend group, while I hadn't done the same with Sue's, which annoyed Nina, as she knew why Sue was doing it. Even now, Sue has no male friends in her circle besides P, while Nina is the only girl in mine. Nina, who had been stuck overseas due to the virus, finally returned to NYC on November 3rd. Oz, Joey, and I decided to throw a dinner and drinks party for her at Joey's place that night to celebrate her return. It was just the 5 of us, Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, who's also Nina's sister, Nina, and myself. We followed CDC guidelines, we took COVID very seriously. Nina, being the evil mastermind she is, came up with a devious idea to mess with Sue. She suggested we take some pictures in the same style as the ones I'd found of Sue and P from months earlier and post them on my Facebook. Which we did. It wasn't until the 5th that Sue found out. I'm guessing some mutual friends noticed my updates and saw how awkwardly close Nina and I were. This really set her off, as she still thought I was cheating, and I'm almost positive she wanted to accuse Nina, but she knew Nina had been stuck in Europe for most of the year. Still, she tried to berate me that night for being so handsy in the pictures. I saw this as the perfect opportunity to set up my knockout punch. I said, "What about those pictures of you and P from last year? He was pretty handsy in those pictures too, but did you see me getting upset about it?" She was instantly speechless. This was the first time in all of this that I'd even mentioned the guy's name. The gears in her head started turning rapidly as she tried to explain the pictures. Up until that point, she didn't even know I'd seen them. That's how infrequently I use Facebook. When I actually post something, it's a big deal to people, which is why the pictures with Nina caused such a stir in our circle. She explained, "He's like that with everyone, he's just a really friendly guy. I know how it looks, but there's nothing to it. I'm sorry if those pictures upset you, I'll take them down." No, what upsets me isn't the pictures, it's the fact that you've been cheating on me for the past year while lying about working overtime and hanging out with friends. That's what upsets me. But as Lieutenant Worf from Star Trek, The Next Generation famously said, revenge is a dish best served cold. From that night on, Sue was extra clingy, extra attentive, bordering on annoying. She tried to show me affection and be intimate with me, but I rebuffed her every time. All the while, I was still documenting everything she was saying to P. By this point, I had long since become numb. Any desire I might have had to save the marriage was dead. I'd been checked out since the day I implemented phase 1 of my plan. She confided in him that I was getting worse, that she didn't know what to do, that she felt like I completely hated her. Which I did. Then came the bombshell. She said she couldn't see him anymore, the guilt was too much, she felt like she was being crushed by karma. She couldn't risk losing me. She said she loved P deeply, but she still loved me, and she had to save her marriage before she lost me. "No, honey, you're about 8 months too late for that." P went ballistic, said some choice things like, "I don't love you the way I love you. You're making a mistake. You can't just throw me away like this. That text exchange was their last conversation until about 3 weeks ago. For the rest of November and into December, Sue was in limbo. She was trying to gauge my feelings but still couldn't tell if I was actually cheating. Meanwhile, P was calling her non-stop, but she wasn't answering him. I saw her checking her phone constantly, but she'd quickly put it away. Meanwhile, phase 2 of the plan was now officially complete. The divorce paperwork was finalized. I'd found a studio apartment in Co-op City, New Yorkers will know the place, and signed a 2-year lease. All my money was in my personal accounts, and I was ready to deliver my knockout punch. So now we're at Thanksgiving. I was hosting a small gathering of our immediate family, my older son and his girlfriend, her parents, she's an only child, myself, Sue, and our younger son. We had a nice evening. My older son's girlfriend is studying to be a chef, and she made all the food herself. That girl can cook. Since I had to maintain the facade that everything was fine between Sue and me, I made a point of showing her affection a few times that night, kisses on the cheek, cute little hugs, putting my arm around her shoulders from behind. These gestures didn't go unnoticed by her, she ate it up. Keep in mind, this was the first time I'd touched this woman since the night she confronted me back in October, about 2 months prior. I won't lie, it disgusted me to do it, but I had to. I couldn't risk jeopardizing the plan, and being cold to her in front of my son's girlfriend, and her parents would have raised red flags. So my younger son decided he wanted to spend the night with his brother, so Sue and I drove home alone. On the drive home, she thanked me for being so nice to her and said, "I don't know what's been going on with you, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to bite back another eruption of maniacal laughter and responded, "I know, I just need some time." So, for the first time since spring, we were actually intimate again. I figured, since what I was about to do, I might as well enjoy one last time before she was out of my life. I won't go into detail, but there was no love involved. When I was finished, she just laid there like a lump, trying to figure out which truck had hit her. There were no cuddles or anything afterward. I just got up, took a shower, and went to sleep in my office, which confused her. But for the first time in 20 years, I used protection. She was definitely confused, but she didn't ask any questions. There was absolutely no way I was going to have unprotected sex with her knowing she'd been sleeping with P for months. I woke up the next day and checked my handy spy app, and for the first time in weeks, she'd responded to P. The guy was completely losing it. He was professing his love for her, saying she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a flame with me that had long since died, that her 23 years with me had been like prison, and that she should go experience the love and affection of a man who would appreciate her. Keep in mind, this guy is 27, 5 years older than our oldest son, yet he was this obsessed with a 45-year-old married mother of 2. This is the guy she chose to wreck our marriage for, to destroy the home we'd built. This pretty boy, soft-handed guy. She responded with pretty much the same thing she'd said the last time they spoke, that she loved him and had enjoyed their time together, but she couldn't lose me. I was still the love of her life, but she'd always hold a place for him in her heart, and if he was willing, they could still be friends, but the physical part of their relationship was over. He begged her to see him one last time that week, and yes, you guessed it, she agreed. Just one more time, what's the harm, right? That's what I'd done to her the night before. Of course, I added all of this to my meticulously compiled file. December 4th marked the beginning of Phase 3, the final phase, of Operation Ninja Ghost. The divorce paperwork was in hand, my new place was secured, now I just had to slowly start moving some of my things out of the house, but first, I had to break the news to my sons. I called my older son home that Friday night, got them both in my office with me, and laid everything out on the table, not the nitty-gritty details, but that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year and that I was filing for divorce. My 17-year-old was especially devastated, as he'd recently gone through his own first experience with betrayal. Yes, his first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months prior. To see him heartbroken again because his own mother would do something like this hit him hard. My older son took it much better and offered to let his younger brother stay with him until things cooled down, which I agreed to. We packed up some of his things, and he asked me if I'd be okay. I told him, I will be, son. You guys will be too. I promise. And then they left. The hardest part was now over. It was time to launch the nukes. Over the next couple of weeks, Oz helped me move some of my most sensitive belongings out of the house, giving him a list of things to grab while Sue and I were at work and leaving him a spare key. These were things Sue wouldn't notice were missing unless someone told her. I also got a new phone and number, giving my new contact information to everyone who needed it. Oz, Joey, Nina, my sons, my sister, and my mother. All the while, I was still playing the part with Sue. She was none the wiser, just getting the occasional breadcrumb of affection from me to keep her from getting suspicious, and she was still in contact with P, not as frequently as before, but the emotional connection was still there. The fog was thin, but it was still there. Meanwhile, I gathered everything, and I mean everything, every piece of data I'd documented since I started my plan, call logs, texts, photos, emails, everything, and started printing it out. Guys, I must have spent over $1,500 on office supplies, printer ink, paper, binders, everything. I cataloged everything in 14 binders in chronological order from the beginning of the affair to the last little bit from 2 weeks prior. I then put each binder in a box and wrapped them in gift wrap, addressing each one to the intended recipients: my mother, my father, who'd passed away 7 years prior, her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. Did I forget to mention that P worked at the same company, and due to the nature of her job, fraternization was strictly forbidden. I took all of this to the post office and sent it all out on December 16th, with an expected delivery date of December 22nd, 24th. Perfect. So now we're at Christmas Eve. Sue came home around her usual time, oblivious to what was about to hit her. I'd stopped tracking her on the app on the 18th. I figured I'd gotten all the information I needed from it. As usual, she took a shower, hung out with me for a bit. I even gave her a back rub on the couch in the living room. Blow her back out. I know, I'm a terrible person. And then she went to bed. The final showdown was upon us. The nuke I'd been preparing since June was finally about to launch. In the middle of the night, I woke up, wrapped one of the remaining 3 binders, attached the divorce papers to the inside front cover, and placed it on my side of the bed with a note that read, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed the rest of my essentials into 2 backpacks and left the house I'd lived in for 23 years, for good. My friends, that was a week ago. As of Sue, I've gone completely off the grid, vanished without a trace. She's blocked on Facebook, but for some reason hasn't blocked me, so I've been keeping tabs on the fallout, which has been glorious. My packages have all been delivered to everyone I sent them to, and Sue is getting absolutely roasted. Her youngest sister completely ripped her a new one, her parents both condemned her, my mom absolutely eviscerated her. It's been incredible. I knew my mom could be harsh, but the things she said to Sue were next level. She's been frantically trying to find out if anyone knows where I am, but those who do are keeping their mouths shut. On her Facebook feed, she's been desperately trying to contact me, assuming I'm probably watching, but I haven't said a single word to her unless my lawyer is present. That will be the next time I breathe the same air as her. There's no way for her to spin this and paint me as the bad guy because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. And according to a friend who works at the same company, she and Poss are apparently being suspended tomorrow, which is just icing on the cake. She's likely going to be unemployed in 2021. As for the final 2 binders, one has been given to my lawyer as the final nail in the coffin for my upcoming divorce, and the last one I have stored away to burn in Joey's fire pit after the divorce is Akanchatilna, finally, finalized. Do I feel guilty about any of this? Not even a little bit. For 23 years, I was faithful to this woman. I gave her the home she wanted. I gave her the family she wanted. I gave her the life I thought we both deserved. I loved her unconditionally. I never wavered, never cheated, never even thought about breaking my vows. When I felt something was affecting our marriage, I went to her and told her, and we worked through it. She chose to seek solace in another man's bed instead of coming to me and telling me she was unhappy with our intimacy at the time. She decided to cheat with some young punk who gave her thrills. So no, I have no guilt or sympathy for what I did or for her. She can go to hell for all I care. The most I stand to lose is my house, 1 car, and maybe a few $100s a month in alimony, which, due to the divorce being filed under adultery statutes in New York, may be waived due to the mountain of evidence I've provided. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me, and I'm never looking back. Quick edit: in some cases, New York isn't fully a fault state. A fault divorce can be filed, which my lawyer has told me my case falls under. I have a meeting tomorrow with my soon-to-be ex and her lawyer. I guess I'll update over here. Update: I tricked my soon-to-be ex-wife into thinking I was cheating, vanished like a ninja, and delivered a Christmas Day haymaker. Christmas Day was my first full day in my new apartment. It's still a work in progress as I have more things to get, but overall, I've made it my home, as I'll be here for at least 2 years. My sons and my older son's girlfriend came over and spent most of the day with me. The girlfriend brought homemade treats and cooked a really great meal. It felt good to just sit down and talk with my sons in a way we hadn't in a long time. My sister also came by with more gifts and hung out with us for a while. It was also the first time she'd seen her nephews in almost a year. Being with them really helped me. If I'd been alone, I think I might have gotten hammered. Everyone left around 8 p.m., and I decided to go hang out with Joey and his wife, Claudia. I spent a few hours with him, had a few drinks, and then headed home. The next big development happened last week, around noon on December 29, 2020, when I got a text from Nina asking if I was free that night. I wasn't, so we made plans to meet after I got off work. She came over, and we went to a restaurant not far from where I work in NYC. We dined indoors at 25% capacity due to the pandemic, but finding a table was pretty easy since a lot of us aren't too keen on dining out much these days. Anyway, we sat down, ordered, and she pretty much laid all her cards on the table. Honestly, I knew this day was coming. She basically confessed that she'd had a crush on me since we were teenagers but never had the chance to tell me because Sue swooped in and got to me first. For background, I'd known Nina 2 years before I met Sue. Like I mentioned, she was the fourth point in our 4-person social circle made up of me, Oz, and Joey. We were the social outcasts in high school, the party kids who didn't fit into any other clique. Back then, Nina had weight issues and was diabetic. She was a full-figured goth girl, very cool, but no guys really gave her a second look, but there was always a chemistry between us. Now, Nina is a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She's gone through that ugly duckling to beautiful swan transformation, if I do say so myself. Long story short, we decided that after my divorce is окончательно finalized, we're going to start dating. So yeah, I slept with her that night, brought her back to my new place, and we had a great time. Do I feel bad about sleeping with her? Absolutely not. Nina has always been a better friend to me than Sue ever was. Not to say Sue wasn't a good friend, but in the almost quarter century I've known Nina, she's always been there for me, even to the point of putting her own feelings aside the day I found out she was willing to let me pursue and ultimately start a life with Sue. That resonated with me on a level I didn't think it would. That kind of selflessness for another person is the definition of true love. I know it sounds like I'm just trying to justify sleeping with her in my head, but for me, it feels right, and I plan on exploring a future with Nina with complete commitment. So, on to yesterday, the day I met with my wife and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It had been 2 weeks since I'd ghosted my soon-to-be ex-wife. I'd gotten a call from my lawyer last Monday saying Sue's lawyer had scheduled a meeting for us on January 6, 2021, which was yesterday, to discuss the divorce terms. I met with him Tuesday morning to discuss the terms I wanted. Long story short, a no-contest divorce based on Sue's marital misconduct. My terms were a full separation of assets. I'm selling her my half of the house. She can have it. We each keep our own vehicles. I keep my vacation cabin in the Poconos, and due to the grounds of marital misconduct, she gets no spousal support from me. As for my son, who I'll refer to as 17 from now on, he's free to choose who he wants to live with after the divorce is finalized, which will most likely be me. Wednesday rolled around, and I showed up to my lawyer's office dressed in my best Johnny Cash attire. My wife and her lawyer were there as well. She looked like a complete mess, on the verge of a breakdown. I kept a stone-cold expression. I won't bore you with the lawyer talk, but her lawyer presented a settlement offer. As soon as she finished detailing the demands, I almost immediately rejected it. Like I said, I won't get into the specifics of the meeting. Long story short, we agreed to a legal separation first, followed by a no-contest divorce. The only modification was that I'll be paying her $653 a month in temporary spousal support to cover her utilities until she gets back on her feet with a job. Yes, she got fired for the affair, as did the affair partner. I'll be paying that for 1 full year after the divorce is окончательно finalized. My income is high enough that it won't make a dent in my finances even if she drags her feet finding a new job, and she has enough savings to last her a while. It's a small price to pay to be rid of this cheating harpy. It should take about 3 months for everything to be finalized, so barring any hiccups, I'll be free of her by early April. After the meeting, my lawyer gave me some words of wisdom before telling me he'd keep in touch and update me on the filing progress. Back out on the street, Sue caught up with me and asked if we could talk. I figured I owed her at least that much. She kept it together pretty well during the meeting, but outside, she just broke down, sobbing about how sorry she was and how she never meant for things to go this far. She said she never intended to fall for the PA, but when she thought I was cheating, it brought home how wrong it was to betray her own husband. She asked if I could ever forgive her, deep down, and maybe if we could try again sometime down the road. She said she couldn't imagine life without me. I told her she better start imagining it now because this would be the last time I'd ever talk to or see her. I told her 17 was almost an adult and old enough to make his own decisions about his future. I said I'd given her half my life, all my love, unconditionally, and she, in her own words, had fallen for another man. There was absolutely no way I could forgive her. Any love I had for her had been chipped away, bit by bit, over the months she was pouring her heart out to her affair partner instead of coming to me to tell me she was unhappy with us. I told her I loved the woman she used to be, but I hated the person standing in front of me, and it would be great if I never had to see her again. We were on a sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, and she was making a scene, crying so hard people were staring as they walked by, but I didn't care at that point. I wasn't trying to humiliate her publicly. I'd pretty much already ruined her socially and professionally, but I needed to get that last bit of emotion out. I finally told her I didn't regret being her husband for 23 years, but I regretted that during those 23 years, she chose the easy way out instead of coming to me to work things out. I owe that last line to you lovely sons of bitches on Reddit because it just popped into my head seconds before I said it. For 23 years, I thought I had her, but it turns out it was just my turn. I put in my Raycons and just fucking walked away. Later that night, her father called to apologize. He said I'd always been a good man to his daughter and told me he was ashamed of her. He raised her better than this. Honestly, I'm going to miss the old guy. My own father passed away years ago, so he'd been like a surrogate dad to me. But after that call, I can't imagine staying in touch with any of her side of the family. Right after the call, I symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced on Facebook. Good enough, it's not officially done yet, but in my eyes, it's over. Like I said, me posting on Facebook is a big deal, so a lot of people started messaging me on Messenger asking questions, and I laid it all out. I filed for divorce from Sue earlier today. Of course, Nina called, shocked that I'd moved so fast. Apparently, I was already working on this when we talked, but she had no idea how far along I was. I asked her if she could come over, and of course, she was there in a heartbeat. We ended up sleeping together again, but this time she stayed the night. We lay in my bed talking late into the night, and I hadn't felt that level of release and connection in a long time. Nina gets me, and I can't get enough of her. She's been on my mind ever since she confessed her feelings for me. Yes, I know some people will say it's wrong to jump into a new relationship so quickly, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the second P touched Sue, so I'm moving on. Good enough, that's that, it's done. My divorce is in motion, and I'm starting something with Nina. I know I said in a reply to someone that I'd probably never get married again, but that was before Nina told me how she felt, and I can't deny I feel the same way. We're going to take things slow and not go public with anything until my divorce from Sue is legally final. As for Sue, I honestly don't give a damn what happens to her. She can move P into our old house for all I care. I'll get my house money in 4 quarterly payments in 2021, and other than the $653 a month going directly into her savings account, I never have to see or talk to her again. I'm forever grateful for all the support, encouragement, and kind words. Update, my soon-to-be ex-wife of 23 years tried to kill herself last night, if you can believe it. I've been sitting on this for hours, not knowing where to post, so this sub seems appropriate. If you want some background, check my post history for the full story. I'm not familiar with how to link to other subs, but you can see my previous 2 posts on my profile. The short version is, I found out my wife of 23 years, 45 years old, was having an affair with a 27-year-old coworker. We have 2 sons, 22 and 17. I orchestrated a plan to completely turn her life upside down, the crux of which was deceiving her into thinking I was cheating too. I kept up the charade for over 4.5 months while gathering evidence of her infidelity and preparing divorce papers and my exit strategy, slowly moving my personal belongings out of our house and into a new apartment, getting a new phone and number, separating my portion of our joint income from our shared accounts, etc. On December 16, 2020, I had collected all the evidence of her affair. I had everything printed out and organized from start to that week in 14 binders, 11 of which I put in gift-wrapped boxes and sent to the most important people in her life, as well as her HR department, between December 22nd and 24th. On Christmas Eve, while she was asleep, I took one of the 3 remaining binders and did the same thing, only this time I put the divorce papers on the inside cover and placed it on my side of the bed. Mind you, she'd had sex with her lover there many times, along with my old phone and my lawyer's card, then ghosted her. Over the next 4 days, her life completely imploded. Her family practically disowned her, the friends who didn't know about the affair ostracized her, and my mother reamed her a new one with the most vicious, cutting words you could imagine. She and her lover were also placed on administrative leave and ultimately fired last week. We had our divorce hearing last week and agreed to a legal separation first, followed by an uncontested divorce and some provisions for her transition income now that she's unemployed. I'll pay utilities and $653 a month until she finds gainful employment, or for a maximum of 1 year after the divorce is final, which is estimated to be 3 months from now. She keeps the house, her car, and her share of the marital assets. I keep my share, my vehicles, car, motorcycle, and boat, and my vacation cabin in the Poconos. After the hearing, we had one last conversation where she tried to justify her infidelity and begged me for another chance after the divorce was final. I, of course, refused, said some harsh things, and walked away from her for good. Which brings us to what happened last night. Since only my closest friends, my 2 sons, my older sister, and my mother have my new contact information, and I've completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife on all social media, she hasn't been able to contact me since I left her on Christmas Eve. But some of our mutual friends can still reach me. Last night, I was hanging out in my apartment when I got a messenger voice call notification from one of those friends, one of the few who hasn't abandoned her after the affair. She answered and wasted no time telling me she'd gone to check on Sue, the soon-to-be ex-wife, and found her unconscious in her bedroom, foaming at the mouth with 2 empty pill bottles next to her. She's in the ICU, critical but stable. The doctors say she's likely to recover. Apparently, she'd been in a bad way after begging me to see her. Her parents and 2 sisters are also at the hospital. I'm guessing they were notified at the hospital after they tried to notify me, but Sue still had my old number listed as an emergency contact. I simply told her no, Sue isn't my problem anymore, and she apparently decided to take the easy way out instead of facing the shame and pain of a 23-year marriage falling apart. Then I told her friend that if Sue's family was there, they could pick up the pieces, but as far as Sue and I are concerned, there is no Sue and I anymore. Then I ended the call. I'd been asleep for a few hours when my sons called me this morning asking if I knew about it. I told them I did, but I also made it clear to both of them that I wouldn't blame them or judge them if they wanted to be there for their mother. She is their mother after all, but I myself was washing my hands of her and couldn't care less what she did or did to herself. They were both taken aback by my attitude but respected my stance. However, now that news of her suicide attempt has gotten out, many of the friends who abandoned her are crawling out of the woodwork saying I need to be there for her, that even after what she did to me, I need to support her in her time of need. I also found out her affair partner tried to see her this morning but wasn't allowed in since he's not family. I'm getting a lot of pressure to go see her, but I have absolutely no feelings left for this woman. I haven't for a long time. I completely died inside during the process of getting revenge for her betrayal, and I maintain that I simply don't care what she's done. In fact, it makes me hate her even more. She's the one who was unfaithful. She's the one who thought a nearly year-long fling with a guy 5 years older than her oldest son was worth destroying a 23-year marriage, and now that she has to face the consequences of her choices, she's chosen the most selfish way to deal with it. Even if she most likely will pull through, she's immediately garnered sympathy from everyone who was condemning her weeks ago, while I'm being painted by most, except her father, who's contacted me in the last couple of hours saying he respects my decision not to see her, as a cold, heartless husband unwilling to show her any compassion. It's like I never really knew this woman, that 23 years of marriage could come to this. Yes, I know the way I ended things might have put her in a bad mental state, but now a whole new problem has arisen because she's either had a complete mental breakdown and decided to off herself, or she's pulled off an extremely risky and shrewd move to regain the support of the people who were condemning her for betraying me just weeks ago. She betrayed me, and now she's the victim. If this sounds like a rant, I apologize, but I'm trying to make sense of all this. I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm not going to see Sue. The day she let PA, my nickname for her lover, put his DCK inside her, she forfeited any right to my concern for her well-being. This might sound heartless, as I've kept a cool head throughout this whole process, but my feelings are still very intense, but I don't care about this woman anymore, not for a long time. I know I'm going to be vilified by a lot of people. I don't particularly care what others think of me. If you were in my shoes, you'd see her actions in a very different light. Some of you will go through my post history to see the story of what I did to her, and you'll conclude that her suicide attempt is my fault, that I tormented her for so many months, deceiving her into thinking I was cheating while she actively was, then destroying her socially and professionally, was the catalyst for her breakdown. Maybe I'm a cold-hearted sociopath, but as Arthur Fleck famously said, you get what you fucking deserve. I gave this woman half my life and did my best to be the best husband she could have had. She herself admitted that I had nothing to do with her decision to cheat. She did it for herself. Her selfishness knows no bounds, and I'm glad to be rid of her. If that makes me the bad guy because I won't go see her and never intend to interact with her again, then so be it. I stand by my goddamn convictions. She chose to betray me, she chose to put her sexual desires above the needs of our marriage, so now it's my turn to choose to put myself above everything. She can rot in the deepest, darkest pits of hell for all I care. Let someone else pick up the pieces. My obligation to care about her well-being ended the day she signed the separation agreement. I just needed to get that off my chest. If you're going to judge my feelings, save it. Like I said above, after 23 years and 2 kids, I never really knew this woman. I have no sympathy for her, and I never will. F her and GR. Quick update, I heard from Sue's father that she's been moved from the ICU to a mental health ward. Doctors are still monitoring her mental state. She's regained consciousness and cognitive ability, but she's apparently very subdued. Her father told me she asked if I'd been to see her, and he said no. Then she went silent after he respectfully said he'd only share any further updates if I inquired, as he understood my position. Also, I've set up counseling for my 17-year-old. His first appointment is next Monday. Update, fallout from the soon-to-be ex-wife's suicide attempt. I'm writing here as a form of therapy, a way to get my thoughts out in a pragmatic way. Today, I went against everything I said in previous posts and comments and decided to go see Sue. She'd been released from the hospital 4 days prior, and believe it or not, it was Nina who convinced me I needed to see her. She said the only way I'd ever truly let go of my disdain for her was to see her one last time in her current state. So around 6 p.m., I called her for the first time since I served her the divorce papers. Her hello was no longer the upbeat, vibrant tone I'd known for over 2 decades. Her voice was raspy and weak. She immediately started crying when she heard my voice and took nearly 3 minutes to compose herself enough to speak. Before she could say anything, I told her I'd be there to see her before 8 p.m., and she agreed. It's about an hour to an hour and a half drive from my new apartment in Co-op City to our old house, so I grabbed some food from the local pizza place and hit the road. I got there around 7:47, and she was already at the door before I even pulled into the driveway. As I approached, I could see the toll her actions had taken on her. She was noticeably thinner, the unhealthy kind of thin. Overall, She looked like something out of The Walking Dead. The first thing she did was try to hug me, but I coldly stopped her. Realizing I wasn't there to comfort her, she immediately recoiled. We went inside and sat in the living room, and Sue almost immediately told me she wanted to clear the air. She told me she'd been in a vicious cycle of guilt and pain since the day we signed the separation agreement, which led to her suicide attempt. Her friend, the one who called me from the hospital, had noticed her behavior and started checking in on her. She said the doctors told her she would have succeeded if she hadn't been found an hour later. She admitted she'd failed me as a wife, that falling for Poss was a mistake, and that it was a mistake not to pull back when she knew she was in too deep. She also apologized for divulging so many details of our marriage to him and for talking badly about me, saying she never thought she was capable of doing something like that, but she did it anyway. She said she justified it in her head at the time, but it finally hit her like a ton of bricks when she thought I was cheating. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating, and she had to get rid of it as fast as she could, but obviously, it was too late. Then she asked me when I stopped caring about her, and I told her it was the night she questioned me with such vehemence about whether I was cheating, knowing full well she'd been cheating for months. At that moment, I lost all respect for her, which solidified my resolve to carry out my plan. She told me she was ecstatic when she woke up on Christmas morning and saw the present I'd left her, until she opened it. When she realized what it was and how much I knew, she completely lost it and hasn't set foot in our bedroom since. She frantically tried to find out if anyone knew where I was, but when she took to Facebook, she started getting lambasted by friends and family for what she'd done, but she had no idea how everyone knew so quickly. That's when I told her about the other binders, and the look of shock on her face was priceless. It fully dawned on her that this was all me. Everything she'd been through, her friends turning on her, her family shaming her, even losing her job was all because of me. After that, she just went silent, shut down. I took the opportunity to use the restroom, which was a complete mess, broken mirror, her skincare products scattered everywhere, and the bathtub looked like it hadn't been cleaned since they took her to the hospital. When I came back to the living room, she was crying with her hands over her face, and I can honestly say I felt nothing, no more anger, no more rage, absolutely no pity whatsoever. They say the opposite of love is indifference, and looking at her, all I felt was indifference. She looked up at me and said I'd messed everything up, that I'd ruined us, that she didn't know what to do, that she couldn't handle this alone. I told her she had her family, her remaining friends, and our sons, but she didn't have me, and she never would again. I told her I was there to put a period on the misery she brought on herself, but once I walked out that door, I wouldn't be coming back. The conversation then shifted briefly to PA. She told me he'd contacted her 2 days prior, they'd talked for a couple of hours, and she finally told him he needed to move on with his life, find a younger woman, and forget she existed. The rest of the conversation was Sue apologizing for betraying me and asking again if this was really the end. I looked her dead in the eye without hesitation and said yes, it had ended long before I served her the divorce papers on Christmas. I felt that was my cue to leave, and without saying anything else, because what more was there to say? I left her sitting on the couch, closed the door behind me, got in my car, and drove home. It's 2:56 a.m. as I'm typing this, and I needed to write it down while it's fresh in my mind. It's all over, the Sue saga is over. My 17-year-old and I both have counseling appointments set up in the coming weeks. Na and I are still doing great and sticking to our plan to keep things low-key until my divorce is legally final. I'm staying positive and motivated and looking forward to a future with a woman I know will cherish and respect me because she's been doing it in secret for decades. Now it's time for me to focus on living my life, so this will probably be my last post for a while. Maybe I'll come back with an update once the divorce is officially final. Thanks to everyone who sent encouraging words and well wishes, and to everyone who complimented my revenge plan. I can honestly say I wish it never had to come to that, but if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing I did, except maybe do more to P than just get him fired. And to that guy who harassed me saying I deserved it because I raped my wife, you're delusional, get lost. Update on how things are progressing and where they're headed. It's been over 2 months since I filed divorce papers on my wife and a month since my last update, which I said might be my last, but a lot has happened since that post, and seeing that I'm back on this account and there are still hundreds of messages and replies since my last post, I will continue to keep everyone updated on what's going on. But before I get into all of that, I must once again give a heartfelt thank you to everyone for all the support and kindness that has been given to me during this difficult time. I appreciate the love I have received on Reddit as much as I appreciate the love I get from my family. First, I want to start with one thing that a lot of people were concerned about. My youngest son, 17, he started individual counseling a few days after my last post. I went with him for the first 2 sessions, then he started going by himself. He goes twice a week, and it has been helping him tremendously. Overall, he is doing well, but I can tell that his trust in relationships has been completely shattered. His own experience with infidelity, coupled with his mother's cheating and her suicide attempt, has left him with some pretty significant scars that I think might take decades to heal. I later found out that his experience was worse than he had let on. He actually caught his ex-girlfriend with a guy he thought was his friend, but it turned out the guy was only being his friend to get close to her. He never told me this part of his breakup, and my heart aches for my son that he had to go through all of this at such a critical time in his development. You do everything you can to protect your kids, but life has other plans. He has decided to stick with individual counseling long term, and I have let him know that nothing is off limits if he needs to talk to me about anything. Next up is my individual counseling. Suffice to say, if you have read most of my posts, I have a bit of an anger problem, which is odd because I have always been an introverted, reserved person, but all of this has apparently awakened a sleeping dragon inside of me, a pure fire breather. I have talked to my therapist about everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything. He was both impressed and shocked when I explained to him the extent of what I did to my ex-wife, which was not the reaction I was expecting. Apparently, I have some antisocial tendencies when provoked, which given everything I have done, I'm not surprised at all. My counseling hasn't been all that dramatic, it's been more organizational, sorting through everything in my mind regarding my marriage falling apart and trying to find balance. Now for the elephant in the room. I don't know where I would be without this woman. I never thought I would have such a caring, understanding, and compassionate woman by my side to help me through all of this. We are still doing great, and while we have to try our best to keep our relationship under wraps, it's pretty much an open secret within our small circle. She just gets me, she's gotten me since we were teenagers, and since she also knows the pain of being cheated on by the person you dedicated your life to, she has done everything she can to help me cope with my feelings. We alternate staying at her place and my place, and we have discussed moving in together, but her 5-year-old daughter is preventing that idea. My place isn't big enough for 3 people, and my lease isn't up until 2022, so for now, we will continue to stay at her place when her daughter is with her father and I stay at her place when she has her daughter. Speaking of her daughter, I adore her, and she adores me. I honestly wish I could find the right words to truly express how much Na means to me through all of this. If you haven't taken the time to read my previous posts, Na had a crush on me since we were sophomores in high school, but she was an ugly duckling back then and didn't think she had a chance with me. She silently watched me pursue, date, and marry my ex-wife Sue, knowing she had feelings for me for over 25 years, and she kept that secret until a week after my divorce hearing when we were out to dinner, and she spilled the beans. I consider myself lucky to have her in my life. We talk about our future together often. Since we have both been burned by marriage, we are definitely not going that route again, but we have discussed civil unions, which we may pursue sometime down the road, but we have both pretty much decided that we are going to be together forever. Last but not least is my soon-to-be ex-wife Sue. I must inform everyone that I have had absolutely no contact with her since my last conversation with her after her suicide attempt. I don't know how she is doing or what she is doing, and I don't want to know. As far as I'm concerned, she is dead to me. This is pretty much where everything stands. Life goes on. As I'm typing this, it's March 2nd, so we are about a month out from the paperwork being finalized, and by this time next month, I will officially be a free man, and I am counting down the days until I can truly start the next chapter of my life. Editing to clarify a few things, I misspoke earlier about being clinically diagnosed as antisocial. I thought because my therapist said I have antisocial tendencies when provoked, that was a clinical diagnosis, but that is not the case, it was just his professional observation. Also, my 22-year-old son, he meant no actual harm to PA, he said that out of anger. Update, the ending and goodbye. On April 13th, exactly 1 month ago, Sue officially became my ex-wife. My lawyer originally told me it would be finalized on the 18th, but partly due to New York starting to open up as COVID cases are declining, it was finalized a few days early. My lawyer Jeff called me on April 12th and asked me to come see him the next day. When I went, he handed me the final notice and shook my hand. I couldn't just leave it at that, so I went up and gave him a hug and thanked him for everything he had done for me. On the drive home, all I could do was reflect on everything that had happened in my life over the past 24 years, all the memories, all the history. When I walked into my apartment, it finally hit me, and I fell to the floor and all the pent-up emotions inside of me just came pouring out. I hadn't cried like that in a long time, but it wasn't a cry of sadness, not at all. My soul felt like it had been released from the deepest, darkest depths. That night I called my 22-year-old son. I kept it brief and told him it was all over, that his mother and I were no longer married. He asked me how I was doing that night, and I'm sure he could tell by my voice that I had been crying, and I told him I was okay. The 17-year-old got on the phone next, and we talked for almost 90 minutes. The 22-year-old and his fiancée have been doing a great job taking care of him, and he is still in therapy as am I. I won't go into detail about what we talked about, but I will say there is still a lot of work to be done, especially when it comes to his outlook on relationships. Na came to see me that night, as she usually does, and I gave her the news. She just wrapped her arms around me and held me tight, and I cried again. After I calmed down again, Nina told me that no matter what, she would never betray me and that she loved me with all of her heart, and I know she meant every word she said. I might get some flack for saying this, as I don't regret my time with Sue, despite everything she has done, which gave me my 2 strong sons, but it's very clear to me now that I chose the wrong woman. Na has given so much these past 4.5 months and has asked for nothing in return. Her only request of me is to be by her side. I won't go on and on about her, but she truly is my hero. There were a few other interesting things that happened once the divorce was finalized. For one, Poss actually reached out to me. Yes, he actually messaged me on Reddit. Turns out when this story blew up on YouTube, he saw it and immediately recognized what it was. Before anyone asks, I won't reveal his Reddit username. I think I've put the kids through enough. The first thing he did was apologize for his part in all of this. He gave me a brief rundown of the fallout from the binders I sent to his mother. Basically, he's been disowned by his family. As I learned while planning my revenge, his mother is a devout Catholic who goes to church 3 days a week, the very religious type, so her view on marriage is sacred. Finding out her son broke up a marriage of nearly a quarter of a century sent her into a blind rage, and she kicked him out that day, and not even a week later, he was fired from his job when his employers received the binders I sent them. He's been couch surfing ever since and trying to find a new job. He claimed he wanted to reach out to me on social media, all the places he had me blocked, but he admitted he was scared because in his words, if I could find him before, I could find him again. I'll admit I could have gone all out and completely destroyed this kid, but I didn't. I asked him when the last time he saw Sue was, and he said he hadn't seen her in months. The last time he spoke to Sue, she told him to forget about her and move on with his life, which lines up with what she told me during my last conversation with her, so at least she wasn't lying about that. I asked a few more questions, and the kid was surprisingly forthcoming. I think he was looking for some sort of absolution for the mess he created. A lot of what he said lined up with the information I got from the text messages I collected. I didn't respond much, I just asked, and he answered. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes, then he told me again how sorry he was, at which point I hit him with this. You're a 27-year-old man who has to live the rest of his life in the shadow that your own mother now hates you because you broke up a marriage that lasted almost as long as you've been alive. I know you messaged me because you're being eaten alive by your conscience, but I'm not going to give you absolution. When I was 27, I was building a foundation, and you're now a homeless, jobless, family-wrecking loser. If you're smart, you'll learn from this, and if you're not, you'll keep doing this until you're my age, assuming you live that long. I was going to wish you good luck, but you don't need luck, you need to get your life together. With that, I ended the conversation and blocked him. It obviously wasn't the absolution he was looking for. I could have been much more hostile, but I think those words were enough to stick with him for a long time. The next big event is that as of May 4, 2021, Na is now officially my wife. Over the past 2 months, we have had long discussions about where we see our relationship going. Nina has made it clear that she has no intentions of being with anyone other than me. She wants my last name, she wants to be my wife, and she wants me to adopt her daughter. We'll call her Anna. As I've mentioned in the past, I absolutely adore the child. She just turned 6 last month for her birthday, and she absolutely idolizes me. She is the first father figure that has been in her life since her biological father pretty much abandoned them when she was 4, and Nina has a habit of not introducing any men she dates to Anna unless they have long-term potential. Needless to say, I have long-term potential, and I have experience raising children. Speaking of Anna, she gets along great with my 17-year-old son. Their big brother/little sister dynamic is both amazing and adorable. The 17-year-old has really latched onto Anna and has found comfort in her. I've talked to my therapist about this, and he said it's definitely a good sign that the 17-year-old sees innocence that he wants to protect in Anna, even though his own innocence has been shattered. So we decided to go to City Hall last Monday and get married. It took 24 hours to get the marriage license, and the reveal was the most anticlimactic thing ever. I mentioned it to my older sister, and she said everyone was already placing bets on when the pregnancy announcement was coming. We thought we were keeping our relationship so secret for so many months, but pretty much everyone had already figured it out, so it was kind of hilarious. Some people will say it's too fast, and yes, I have said in comment replies in the past that I would never get married again, but that was all before Nina and I's true relationship came to light. This woman has professed her undying, unconditional love for me, and she has laid in my arms crying about how happy she is and that she never thought she would have a chance with me. She has described in great detail her feelings for me over the past 25 years and how even during her marriage, she was lamenting that Sue had won me over, and I honestly had no idea the depth of it. She has even said that she has had thoughts herself of having an affair with me at times, but she would never be that type of person. Even with all of that, she has given me so much over the years I've known her and has asked for very little in return. Not even the woman I was married to and had 2 children with ever professed her love for me the way Nina has. I would be a fool not to marry her, so now she is my last name, and we are in the early paperwork stages of me adopting Anna. Finally, Sue. I haven't spoken to her in 4 months since my last visit to our old house, but mutual friends, the few that are left, will give me updates on her from time to time. Through one of those friends, a real estate agent I know, I found out she sold the house, and he got her a job at his firm as a file clerk, which also eliminated the alimony I had to pay her due to her unemployment. She's now living in a small apartment close to the office, which he also helped her secure. She's still functioning, but she's just a shell of her former self. She has barely gained any weight back and keeps to herself. She comes to work, does her job, and doesn't interact with anyone except him, Which is probably because, her having an affair with a coworker is what started this whole thing. The last update I got on her was at the end of March, and I thanked him for looking out for her but told him I didn't need any more updates on her. She is no longer my problem. I'm almost positive she knows about Na and me because some of the surviving mutual friends have commented on us. With the 17-year-old turning 18 in a year, there's no reason for me to ever speak to her again, and I won't. My journey of betrayal, revenge, suicide attempts, and emotional turmoil has come to an end. I'll answer some questions and maybe reply to some comments, but after this, I'm finally going back to the swamp to live happily ever after with my new froggy wife and her little tadpole. I sincerely thank the thousands of people who have given me advice, well wishes, and praise through all of this. It has been humbling and an honor to be able to share my story and help others who are going through the torment of infidelity. To the new friends I have truly made on Reddit, I love you all. I never thought I would find such great people in a place that is filled with not so great comments. Stay green, stay classy. The story ends here. Just a final note. This story was quite the undertaking to translate and uncover, like trekking through a blizzard. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and sharing.